Here we are in downtown Salem in Townhouse Square. Townhouse Square is the intersection of Essex Street and Washington Streets, and it has been the center of downtown Salem for going on 400 years, for a couple of reasons. First is that the original source of clean drinking water, the freshwater spring that was laid at the site of the town pump, was located just a few steps over that way. So anybody high and low, rich and poor, you had to get your water from somewhere. You got it from the spring and later the pump that was just over there. The second reason this was an important intersection is because the original Puritan meeting house used to stand directly behind me. That's not the original Puritan meeting house. The original Puritan meeting house, the original Puritan church, wouldn't have looked like much of a church to us. The building itself would have looked probably more like a barn. It would have been a very plain, unassuming wooden structure. There's no stained glass. There'd be no cross. It's way too Catholic. And anybody in town who lived in town went to that church because church attendance was compulsory. The Puritans were not big on religious freedom. They had founded this Bible Commonwealth basically on the right to be Puritan. So, if you live here in town, that's the church you go to. So if you're Roman Catholic, you're really not particularly welcome. If you're Church of England, they want to fix you. They think you're part of the problem. If you're a Quaker, they hate you. Puritans and Quakers hate each other's guts. Now, we think of Quakers today as being these really peaceful hippie Christians. They're pacifists. They sit in silence until one of them is moved to speak. But they just think that the Puritans are theologically misguided, and they're much more aggressive about their beliefs. There are stories about Quakers breaking into Puritan meetings to chew out the minister, try to break up the meeting. They do this thing where they break a bottle, they wave the bottle around like it's a bar fight. They say that your faith is as empty as a broken bottle. In the 1650s, a Quaker woman comes here to Salem, a woman named Deborah Wilson, and Deborah Wilson walks right down Essex Street, right past the church that used to be here, stark naked. This is meant as a protest. Her point is that this church is bare, it's naked, it's got nothing. They arrest her, they tie her wrists to the back of a cart. I'm not clear if the cart is supposed to be moving and running her out of town, but she's sentenced to be whipped, 30 strips with a lash. Now, they can't quite bring themselves to go through with this, though. Her husband stands nearby, clapping his hands to make the sound of a whip, and the person who's supposed to be whipping her is sort of making the motion of it. Still, a fairly humiliating punishment to be standing there stripped to the waist, of course, tied to the back of a cart. But we still let her off comparatively easily. Quakers who do this kind of nude protest or other sort of protests in Boston are punished much more harshly. They clip their ears, they cut their tongues, or sometimes just hang them on Boston Common, and they're done. So, Puritans and Quakers hate each other's guts. It's really easy to pick on the pacifist, right? Now, like I said, this is the fourth church building that has been on this site. This church building goes back to the early 1800s, 1830s or 40s, I believe. It's no longer an active church. But even when it was, there's always a shop on the first floor. Even God needs to pay the rent, apparently. And one of the really popular and long-lasting stores is this Daniel Lowe and Company. The sign is still there on the side of the building, even though the store is long gone. Now, Daniel Lowe is a dry goods merchant. He also runs a fantastic silver counter, silver department. This is, at least according to his advertising, the place to go to get your silver, your jewelry, your silverware around Essex County, the premier jeweler in Essex County. Daniel Lowe goes on vacation in the 1890s. He goes to Europe, early 1890s. And as he makes the rounds of different tourist stops in Europe, he sees over and over again those little silver souvenir spoons. And you know, sort of thing I mean? Little spoons like the Eiffel Tower for handle. It says Paris. You buy it as a cute little souvenir of your time in Paris. He has never seen anything like this before. These do not exist in America. When he comes home for 1892, that's the 200th anniversary of the Salem witch trials, he brings out the Salem witch spoon. So a little silver souvenir spoon. It's got a witch on a broom on the handle. It says Salem. This isn't one of them. I wish it were, but it's not. He cannot keep these things in stock. They fly off the shelf. They are remarkably popular. He has to keep reissuing them year after year, coming up with new and interesting and unusual designs. This being the 19th century, there's a lot of weird silverware that we don't really use anymore. Bonbon tongs and all kinds of weird silverware that normal folks don't use anymore. But if he can put a witch on a broom on the handle, he does. There are collectors who will pay hundreds of dollars for original Daniel Lowe witch spoons to this day. This does two things. First is it launches the silver souvenir spoon business in America. This did not exist before Daniel Lowe imported this idea back with him from Europe. And the second thing it does is it's the first real attempt at kind of merchandising the town's weird notoriety. As you walk up and down Essex Street when you finally get to visit Salem, once all this is over, you walk up and down Essex, you can go into different shops, you can buy your t-shirts, your keychains, your mugs, your shot glasses. They're going to have a witch on a broom. They're going to say Salem. As you buy those kind of touristy tchotchkes, and you know you will, you can think of Daniel Lowe and his spoon. He's the one who launches the kind of merchandising of the town's weird notoriety. Now, I'm standing in front of a church, so I might as well preach for just a minute. It is a kind of nice day right in downtown Salem on a Saturday. It should be packed. Now, I know these aren't normal times, but this is kind of what Salem looks like without tourism. I know living in a tourist town, it can be really hard to kind of love the tourists all the time. You have to stand in line to get your coffee. You can't find any place to park. It's always packed. So we're often a bit critical of the tourists, but this is what it looks like when there aren't tourists here. And once all of this is over, what's going to get us out of this hole that we're in for the foreseeable future? Tourism is going to help. So here endeth the lesson. Now, let's go down this way. We'll look at some really bad public art.